So let's have a look at what we have on these. Let's give it some nice colors. So let's say we have this color for the sand, this color for the grass, and we'll say that this is going to be the, or let's just change the color here, and this is going to be the rock. Pretty much the same thing. Just make sure that, yeah. So we have rock all over, a bit of grass here and there, and this isn't looking as I wanted. Let's check it out. Okay, so it was just a matter of clearing up the mask. I forgot to clear out the mask, and that was messing up our terrain. But now you can see here, let's give this a bit more of a controlled level of saturation. And here as well, let's make it a bit more desaturated. Okay, now we have our rock, our sand, and our grass. A nice combination. So we mounted our system, it's working. And now we should just remember one more thing. We have a trees layer, and where we have that layer, we know we're going to have trees. What I mean by this, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because we really want to have trees on grass, and we want to avoid having trees on rock. So what we can do is, to make sure that that never happens, we're going to grab the trees layer, same way as we did here. Let's get the trees. We don't need to remap the trees. They're already going from 0 to 1 because they're coming from a mask. So the source will be the trees, and this is the mask. And as you can see here, it might be happening that we're scattering trees on top of rock. And if that's the case, we want to make sure that that's not the case. So what we can do is, when we create our rock layer, we can immediately subtract the trees. And that way this will never happen. So if I go here, we have our mask by feature. Let me just pull this down. Supposedly we're masking by feature. This looks like a nice place to have the rocks layer, but we need to make sure that we don't have rock where we have trees. So we need to combine these two, and I'm gonna use a height field layer, and we're gonna subtract from the rock layer, we're gonna subtract the trees layer, which is a lot. Mask. Okay. Really not much rock left. And as you can see, the trees covered pretty much most of this area. A lot of trees, and we're not even considering the shrubs, because from the point lighter information that we download from Open Topography, this had a lot of vegetation on the ground, and we're just considering the trees. And as you can see, the trees cover most of the surface, and so it's not surprising that we have so little rock exposed. But if you want to have more rock exposed, then you just adjust these parameters. So let's say we go up to 90 degrees here, see if this brings up a bit more. Not much happening. The minimum slope, you can also kind of expand it. Okay, let's say minimum slope of 16 or 15, and this is the way we can recover some of the rock. Yeah, I think this is a nice combination. We do have some intermediate values here, which I'm not a big fan of. So not a bad idea to actually remap this. Just make sure that we have a good enough contrast. We're going to be remapping the mask. Okay, and that way we kind of, it's a bit sharp, maybe too sharp. But I think this makes more sense. Remember, we're also going to be just using the selected area. So these are really close to the margins, so it's not much of a problem. But I think it makes sense for us to avoid having a gradient coming too much to the inside. And the only difference is that now we have the actual, so this is the rock layer that we had before, and this is the actual rock layer that we're going to have, considering that we're going to be scattering trees on top of this. So this will also, it might also make sense for us to actually have a switch here, and we can choose if we want to consider the scattering of trees or not. So we can take care of that right away, the switch, and we'll have a switch here. So if we don't want to, if we're not worried about scattering the trees, then we go this way. If we want to take into account the trees scattering, then we go the other way. Okay, for now I'm gonna take into account the tree scattering, and this is gonna give us the results, this result. Okay, let me just make sure that, okay, here on the, when we're combining these two on this side, if I now do place a remap here, you'll notice that we're going below 0. That's probably what's happening. If I compute range, let's say mask. Okay, we're going from -1 to 1, and that's why we get that weird result at the end. Okay, no longer looks like what we had before. We have a new color around here somewhere. So what we're going to do is actually remap this from -1 to 1 to 0 to 1, and we're going to clamp it to a minimum and a maximum just to avoid that problem. So this is going to be our mask, and now we're sure that our mask, which comes from -1 to 1, is actually going from 0 to 1. Maybe not, still not looking as I expected it to look. Okay, so we need to pull up the contrast. Yeah, remembering that this was going from -1 to 1, so it makes sense that we need to put this in the middle. So this would go from -1 to 1, and now it's going from 0 to 1, so we want the gradient to be starting just from there. And now we should have the final result. Okay, and if we decide we want to disregard the trees, then we have a bit more rock. If we want to take into account trees, if it's covered with trees, then we have less rock and more terrain.